Hello and welcome back to the Sleepyhead Geographer. Tonight, let's step away from the rush of our modern world and find peace in something truly timeless. Take a deep breath and let your shoulders drop. Release the tensions of today, the worries of tomorrow. Let them drift away like morning mist over ancient fields. We journey through time to a place where the earth holds 5,000 years of memory, where vast stones stand in silent circles, and our ancestors once watched the sun and moon dance across endless skies. Tonight, we visit Stonehenge, where whispered prayers ride the wind and ancient wisdom sleeps beneath weathered sarsen stones. If you're enjoying these sleep stories, a gentle like, share, and subscribe helps others find this calm space too. Let's travel back together, far beyond the reach of written history, to a time when this corner of England looked nothing like the world we know. Picture yourself standing on Salisbury Plain 5,000 years ago, when thick forests of oak and elm stretched endlessly toward every horizon. The air was cleaner then, filled with the scent of wildflowers and the sound of streams that ran crystal clear through valleys carved by ancient ice. Close your eyes and feel the soft earth beneath your feet. This was a land where red deer picked their way carefully through dappled sunlight, filtering down through the forest canopy. Wild boar snorted and foraged among ferns that grew waist-high in the perpetual twilight of the woodland floor. Overhead, the calls of countless birds created a symphony that had played unchanged since the great ice sheets retreated northward. At Blickmead, just over a mile from where Stonehenge would one day rise, a sacred spring bubbled up from deep within the chalk. This wasn't just any water source, but a miracle that never froze, even in the harshest winters. To the people who lived here then, this constant flow of warm, mineral-rich water must have seemed like a gift from the gods themselves. Archaeological evidence tells us that humans had been drawn to this special place for over 10,000 years. Generation after generation came to hunt the mighty aurochs, those magnificent wild cattle that stood 6 feet tall at the shoulder. They left behind flint tools scattered in the earth like forgotten prayers, each one shaped with skill that could create edges sharper than our finest steel. As centuries passed, the great forests began to open up into clearings where wild grasses grew thick and tall. Around 4000 BCE, new people arrived from across the sea, carrying with them seeds of wheat and barley, along with gentle cattle and woolly sheep. These Neolithic farmers looked upon the ancient woodland with different eyes, seeing not wilderness to move through, but potential waiting to be unlocked. Slowly, carefully, they began the patient work of clearing small areas of forest. Using fire and stone axes, they created the first fields on Salisbury Plain. The rich chalk soil proved perfect for their crops, and their animals thrived on the grasslands that gradually replaced the ancient trees. Smoke rose gently from their timber houses, carrying the scents of cooking grain and roasted meat across this slowly changing landscape. But even as they transformed the physical world around them, these early farmers maintained something precious that we've largely lost. They lived with constant awareness of the sacred, understanding themselves to be part of something infinitely larger than their individual lives. The changing phases of the moon guided their farming cycles. The position of the sun marked their festivals and ceremonies. Every aspect of daily life was woven into the great tapestry of cosmic rhythm. Their pottery tells stories we're only beginning to understand. Beautiful vessels decorated with intricate spirals and geometric patterns that may have held meanings as deep as prayer. They created tools not just for practical work, but for ceremonies that connected their communities to the eternal dance of earth and sky above. The dead were treated with particular reverence in this ancient world. Long barrows, earthen mounds that still dot the landscape today, required enormous community effort to construct. Inside these sacred places, generations of ancestors were laid to rest with precious grave goods, suggesting beliefs about an afterlife where such treasures might be needed for journeys beyond this world. At night, when their work was done and fires flickered in their hearths, these people would look up at skies unpolluted by any artificial light. The stars shone with a brilliance we can barely imagine, wheeling overhead in patterns that guided travelers and marked the passage of seasons. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a bright river of light, while the moon waxed and waned in cycles that governed the rhythm of all life. This intimate relationship with the movements of sun, moon, and stars wasn't merely practical calendar keeping. It was deeply spiritual, connecting human communities to forces they recognized as divine. They observed how certain celestial alignments coincided with crucial moments in their agricultural year, leading them to see the heavens as a great calendar written in light across the darkness. By 3200 BCE, something extraordinary was beginning to stir in the hearts of these communities. Perhaps it started with shared dreams, visions that came to people as they slept under those brilliant stars. Maybe it began with the quiet wisdom of elders who had spent lifetimes watching the sky, noticing patterns that seemed to call for some kind of human response, some acknowledgement of the divine order they witnessed nightly. The sacred spring at Blick Mead continued to flow, its constant warmth a reminder that some places on Earth are touched by forces beyond ordinary understanding. The fertile fields produced abundant harvests when the celestial signs were read correctly. The community had grown prosperous and confident, their skills refined through generations of careful observation and patient work. All the elements were coming together like pieces of some vast cosmic puzzle. The people had the skills and the vision. The landscape itself seemed to be waiting, its gentle rise toward the northeast perfectly positioned to frame the midsummer sunrise. The stage was set for something unprecedented, a monument that would connect earth and sky in ways that would inspire wonder and contemplation for 5,000 years to come. Around 3100 BCE, the vision became reality. Picture the moment when community leaders first walked across the grassland that would become Stonehenge, feeling beneath their feet the subtle rise in the landscape that made this spot different from all others. Here, on this gentle slope facing northeast toward the midsummer sunrise, they made a decision that would echo through 50 centuries of human history. The first monument they created was elegantly simple, yet profoundly meaningful. We can imagine the ceremony that marked the beginning of this sacred work. Families gathering from settlements scattered across the plain, their children wide-eyed with wonder at the gleaming white circle beginning to take shape in their familiar landscape. Elders sharing stories and wisdom that had been passed down through countless generations, while younger voices joined in the ancient songs that had always accompanied great communal endeavors. Using antler picks worn smooth by countless hands and wooden shovels crafted from the hearts of oak trees, teams of workers began digging a circular ditch more than 330 feet across. But this wasn't random excavation. Every measurement was carefully planned using rope and wooden stakes to ensure perfect geometry that would have impressed the architects of classical Greece, built centuries before such precision was thought possible. The work took place across several seasons, with different times of year bringing different phases of construction. During the long days of summer, when light lasted from early dawn to late evening, large teams would gather to move the heaviest loads of chalk. Winter work was more limited, focused on the detailed finishing touches that would make the monument worthy of its sacred purpose. Each shovelful of chalk was removed with reverence, with understanding that they were creating not just a boundary, but a threshold between the ordinary world and the sacred. The circular ditch they carved into the earth was like a great bowl, designed to hold something precious and powerful beyond imagining. The chalk they excavated wasn't discarded as waste, but carefully piled into a bank on the inner edge of the circle. Fresh chalk has an almost luminous quality, especially when struck by the low sun at dawn or dusk. This gleaming white earthwork would have been visible from miles away, announcing to all who saw it that something extraordinary was taking place on Salisbury Plain. Archaeological investigations have revealed fascinating details about this construction process. The ditch wasn't dug continuously, but in segments, with different groups of workers responsible for different sections. Each segment shows slightly different tool marks and techniques, suggesting that various family groups or neighboring communities contributed their own distinct efforts to the collective vision. Within the sacred circle, they dug 56 carefully spaced holes, each about 3 feet deep and arranged in a precise ring. These Aubrey holes held wooden posts made from large oak trees, their bark carefully stripped away to reveal the pale wood beneath. The positioning of these holes reveals sophisticated understanding of lunar cycles that wouldn't be matched in European astronomy for thousands of years. The number 56 is deeply significant, representing exactly 3 cycles of the moon's complex 18.6-year pattern across the sky. This tells us that the builders weren't just creating a monument for their own generation, but planning for observations that would span decades into the future, a gift of knowledge for children not yet born. At the northeastern edge of the circle, they left a carefully planned gap in both the ditch and the bank. This entrance was aligned with remarkable precision toward the point on the horizon where the midsummer sun would rise. Standing at the center of the circle on the longest day of the year, observers would see the sun appear directly through this gap, flooding the sacred space with golden light that seemed to flow from the stones themselves. But the monument's astronomical capabilities went far beyond this single dramatic sunrise. The careful positioning of every element created a sophisticated observatory for tracking multiple celestial cycles. The Aubrey holes corresponded to significant points in the moon's journey across the sky, while other features marked important solar events throughout the year. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that the builders also erected several standing stones within the original earthwork. These weren't the massive sarsens we see today, but smaller stones, including some that may have been brought from distant locations even at this early stage. One stone in particular, the heel stone, was positioned outside the main circle at precisely the right spot to mark the midsummer sunrise as seen from the center. The effort required to create this first monument was staggering. Moving the chalk and organizing the work required about 11,000 hours of labor. If 50 people worked together, it would have taken them about 4.5 months of continuous effort. But the work probably stretched across several years, with communities gathering during quiet agricultural seasons to contribute their labor to this sacred project. The social implications are extraordinary. Creating Stonehenge required unprecedented cooperation between communities scattered across hundreds of square miles. They needed to coordinate not just the physical work, but the feeding and housing of large groups of people working together. This suggests political and social organization far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined for Neolithic Britain. The ceremonies that marked the completion of this first phase would have drawn people from across the region and perhaps far beyond. Hundreds gathering within the gleaming white circle as the sun set on the longest day of the year. Fires would have been lit as darkness fell, their flames reflecting off the chalk banks and wooden posts. The sound of drums and singing would have carried across the plain, announcing to the world that something unprecedented had been accomplished. Archaeological evidence shows that this first Stonehenge remained active for centuries. The wooden posts were maintained and occasionally replaced. Small ritual deposits were placed around the circle, including cremated human remains that suggest the site served as a sacred cemetery, where select members of the community could rest in eternal alignment with the movements of sun and moon. As we imagine walking through this first monument in our minds, we can picture the night ceremonies that would have taken place here. Families arriving along ancient trackways, carrying bundles of food and precious possessions, children seeing the gleaming white circle for the first time, their voices joining in songs that connected their small lives to the vast cosmos wheeling overhead. The monument they had created was designed to be permanent, but it was also designed to grow. The careful positioning of every element, the mathematical precision of the alignments, the generous source of the earthwork itself, all suggested that this was just the beginning of something even more ambitious. 4 centuries after the first circle was completed, around 2600 BCE, an extraordinary vision captured the imagination of the Stonehenge communities. This wasn't about improving what already existed, but about undertaking something so ambitious, so seemingly impossible, that it speaks to absolute faith in its sacred necessity. These visionaries decided to transport enormous stones across 140 miles of wilderness, from the Preseli Hills of Wales to Salisbury Plain. Let's travel in our minds to those distant Welsh mountains, where mist clings to ancient peaks and streams cascade through valleys carved by countless centuries of rainfall. Here in the Preseli Hills, around 3400 BCE, skilled workers had begun the patient process of quarrying what we now call the blue stones. But these weren't random rocks chosen for convenience. Recent archaeological investigations have revolutionized our understanding of this incredible undertaking. In 2015, researchers discovered the actual quarries where the blue stones were extracted, hidden in remote valleys at Craig Ros y Felin and Carn Goa-Dog. The evidence shows sophisticated operations that used fire and water to split massive stones from living rock faces. Picture the ancient quarrymen building fires against the stone, heating it intensely, then pouring cold water over the hot surface. The thermal shock would cause the rock to crack along natural fault lines, allowing them to extract stones of specific shapes and sizes. This precise technique reveals knowledge passed down through generations of master craftsmen. But these stones were chosen for more than their workability. The blue stones included spotted dolerite, rhyolite, volcanic tuff, and sandstone, each with distinctive acoustic properties. When struck, many produce clear, ringing tones like church bells. Some researchers believe the stones were selected specifically for their musical qualities, suggesting Stonehenge was designed as a vast stone orchestra. Archaeological evidence suggests these stones originally formed part of a dismantled stone circle somewhere in Wales. Imagine this original monument, perhaps nestled in a secluded valley among the Preseli Hills, where it had stood for generations as a focal point for ceremonies and seasonal celebrations. The decision to dismantle this sacred site and transport its stones to Salisbury Plain suggests a spiritual calling that transcended territorial boundaries. The logistics of moving these stones challenge our understanding of Neolithic capabilities. The largest blue stones weigh up to 4 tons each, and at least 80 stones made the journey to Stonehenge. Recent experimental archaeology has tested various methods of prehistoric transportation, revealing the ingenuity of our ancestors. The most likely route began with wooden sleds carrying the stones down to the Welsh coast. Here, they would have been loaded onto specially constructed boats, probably large dugout canoes lashed together to create stable rafts. The sea voyage required unprecedented maritime expertise, as the stones travelled along the treacherous Welsh coast, around Cornwall, and up the Bristol Channel. Picture these ancient mariners navigating by stars and coastal landmarks, their precious cargo of sacred stones secured carefully in their boats. They would have waited for favourable weather, understanding that storms could send centuries of spiritual labor to the bottom of the sea. The coordination required suggests maritime networks far more advanced than previously imagined for prehistoric Britain. From the Bristol Channel, the stones travelled up the River Avon, a journey requiring intimate knowledge of tidal patterns and seasonal water levels. Archaeological evidence of prehistoric trackways shows that communities had created sophisticated systems of wooden causeways across marshy ground, allowing heavy loads to be moved even through the most difficult terrain. The final stages of the journey across Salisbury Plain would have required hundreds of people working in coordinated teams. Using wooden levers, ropes made from twisted plant fibers, and carefully placed rollers, they moved each stone along prepared trackways. Modern experiments show that moving a 4-ton stone requires at least 150 people pulling in unison, with additional teams managing rollers and steering. But this wasn't mere manual labor. Every step of the journey would have been accompanied by ceremonies, songs, and rituals that transformed the transportation into a sacred pilgrimage. The coordination needed suggests sophisticated communication systems, probably involving rhythmic chanting or singing to synchronize the efforts of hundreds of workers. The acoustic properties of the bluestones add another layer of mystery to their selection. Recent research has explored whether Stonehenge was designed as a massive musical instrument. The arrangement of stones could have created complex sound effects during ceremonies, with drum beats and voices resonating between the rocks in ways that enhanced the spiritual experience. Water played a crucial role in both the practical and spiritual aspects of the stone transport. Springs in the Preseli Hills were considered sacred, and water from these sources may have travelled with the stones to Stonehenge. Recent analysis of cremated remains found at Stonehenge shows that some individuals came from Wales, suggesting that people as well as stones made the long journey east. The arrival of each group of bluestones would have been cause for major celebration. Imagine the excitement as people gathered from across the region to witness these miraculous stones being positioned within the ancient earthwork. The bluestones brought with them not just physical presence, but spiritual power from the sacred Welsh landscape. The positioning of the bluestones within the existing earthwork required careful planning. They were arranged in multiple settings, including a double circle and various formations, all precisely aligned with astronomical phenomena. This wasn't random placement, but sophisticated design that integrated the new stones with the existing monument's celestial alignments. Recent discoveries reveal that some bluestones show evidence of having been shaped and reshaped multiple times, suggesting that the monument's design evolved over decades as builders experimented with different arrangements. This iterative approach reveals communities willing to invest enormous effort, not just in initial construction, but in continuous refinement of their sacred vision. Archaeological evidence shows that the bluestones weren't all transported at once, but arrived over several decades. This suggests multiple expeditions, each bringing new stones to add to the growing monument. The logistics of organizing repeated journeys across 140 miles of challenging terrain speaks to sustained community commitment spanning generations. The completion of the bluestone installations around 2500 BCE marked Stonehenge's transformation from a local ceremonial site to a monument of regional significance. The investment of resources required to transport stones from Wales demonstrates that Stonehenge had become central to the spiritual and political life of prehistoric Britain in ways we're only beginning to understand. Around 2500 BCE, as the bluestones settled into their new home, an even more audacious vision began to take shape. The builders of Stonehenge were about to attempt something that would test the absolute limits of Neolithic engineering. The construction of massive sarsen stone trilithons that would create one of humanity's most enduring architectural marvels. The sarsen stones they chose were giants sleeping in the landscape, massive sandstone blocks scattered across the downs like titans from some forgotten age. These stones had formed over 25 million years ago when sand deposits hardened into incredibly dense rock. Unlike the bluestones transported from Wales, the sarsens were local, found in deposits about 20 miles north of Stonehenge in what is now the Marlborough Downs. But local becomes relative when dealing with stones that weigh up to 50 tons each. The largest sarsen at Stonehenge weighs approximately 35 tons, and stands 16 feet tall. To put this in perspective, these stones are heavier than most modern houses, yet they were moved and positioned with absolute precision, using nothing but human muscle, wooden tools, and ingenious engineering techniques. Picture the scene as teams of surveyors first walked among these stone giants, selecting candidates for their sacred purpose. They chose sarsens with relatively flat surfaces that could be shaped into the precise forms required for construction. Each stone was examined carefully, its grain and structure assessed by craftsmen whose knowledge had been passed down through generations. The shaping process was extraordinary in its precision and patience. Using smaller sarsen stones as hammers, teams of workers gradually pecked away at the surface of each giant block, slowly creating the smooth faces and precise angles required. Archaeological experiments suggest that shaping a single upright stone required over 500 hours of intensive labor by skilled craftsmen. Each upright sarsen was carefully tapered, wider at the base and narrower at the top, creating visual effects that compensate for perspective distortion. When viewed from ground level, this tapering makes the massive stones appear even more perfectly proportioned than they actually are. This sophisticated understanding of visual perception reveals architectural knowledge that wouldn't appear again in Europe for over 1,000 years. The most remarkable engineering achievement was the creation of the trilithons, those iconic structures where two massive upright stones support an equally massive horizontal lintel. The precision required to balance 50-ton stones atop 20-foot-tall uprights defies easy comprehension. Recent analysis reveals sophisticated joinery techniques used to secure these impossible structures. The lintel stones were carved with mortise and tenon joints that fitted precisely into corresponding shapes carved into the tops of the upright stones. Additional tongue and groove joints connected adjacent lintels, creating a continuous ring that could withstand centuries of weather and seismic activity. These joints were carved with tolerances that would challenge modern stonework. Moving the sarsen stones from their source to Stonehenge required unprecedented organization. Experimental archaeology suggests that transporting a 50-ton stone would have required at least 500 people working in coordinated teams, with additional hundreds managing the complex logistics. The human resources required suggest that Stonehenge construction drew workers from across much of prehistoric Britain. The route from the Marlborough Downs would have required extensive preparation. Teams of workers cleared paths, built causeways across wet ground, and constructed ramps to help the massive stones navigate changes in elevation. This infrastructure project alone would have been one of the largest engineering undertakings in prehistoric Europe. Picture one of these massive stones beginning its journey. Hundreds of people gathered around the selected sarsen, their voices rising in coordinated chants that helped synchronize the enormous effort. Wooden rollers were positioned carefully beneath the stone, while teams with ropes took their positions for the slow, careful process of dragging the giant toward its destiny. The journey would have taken weeks, with the stone moving perhaps only a few hundred yards per day. Rest stops weren't just practical necessities, but opportunities for ceremony and community building. People from settlements along the route would have gathered to witness the passage of these miraculous stones, bringing food and supplies to support the workers in their sacred labor. Once the Sarsens reached Stonehenge, the real engineering marvel began. Recent research suggests that the builders constructed sophisticated earthwork ramps to raise the massive stones into their final positions. These ramps would have required moving enormous quantities of earth and chalk, creating temporary hills that allowed human muscle power to overcome the challenge of lifting stones weighing dozens of tons. The precision of the final positioning reveals mathematical knowledge that challenges our assumptions about prehistoric capabilities. The sarsen circle was laid out as a perfect geometrical figure, with each stone positioned to within inches of its planned location. The sightlines between stones create complex visual relationships that suggest sophisticated understanding of perspective and proportion. Archaeological evidence shows that construction was carefully staged, with different phases separated by periods of use and ceremony. The monument wasn't built and then inaugurated, but was actively used throughout its construction, with communities gathering to celebrate each milestone. This integration of construction and ceremony transformed the building process itself into a prolonged religious experience. The acoustic properties of the completed sarsen circle add another dimension to its architectural achievement. The massive stones create complex sound effects, amplifying voices and musical instruments while filtering out external noise. Recent acoustic analysis suggests that the circle was designed to enhance the human voice, creating a prehistoric amphitheater optimized for ceremonial performance. The final positioning of the trilithons required engineering techniques that remained unmatched in European architecture for over 1,000 years. The builders somehow managed to lift 50-ton lintels 20 feet into the air and position them with such precision that they've remained stable for over 4 millennia. The methods they used remain debated, but the achievement stands as testament to human ingenuity and determination. By around 2400 BCE, the Great Sarsen Circle was complete, its massive trilithons framing the earlier bluestone arrangements in perfect astronomical alignment. The monument now combined local materials representing the foundations of the British landscape, with exotic stones connecting it to distant sacred sites. This synthesis created something unprecedented in human architecture. Standing within the completed circle, observers would have been surrounded by stone giants that seemed to touch the sky itself. The psychological impact of these massive structures, combined with their precise astronomical alignments, created a space where human ceremonies could take place against a backdrop of cosmic grandeur. As the great sarsen trilithons settled into their eternal positions, Stonehenge revealed itself to be far more than an impressive feat of prehistoric engineering. The monument had become a sophisticated astronomical instrument, a stone calculator capable of tracking the complex movements of sun, moon, and stars with precision that rivals modern observations. To understand Stonehenge fully, we must learn to see it as its builders did, as a sacred machine for measuring time itself. The most famous alignment points toward the midsummer sunrise, when the sun appears directly over the heelstone as viewed from the center of the monument. But this single alignment was just the beginning of a complex astronomical program that demonstrates understanding of celestial mechanics that wouldn't be matched in European astronomy for thousands of years. Picture yourself standing at the heart of the stone circle on the longest day of the year, as our ancestors did 5,000 years ago. In the pre-dawn darkness, you would hear the whispered conversations of hundreds of pilgrims who had traveled from across Britain to witness this moment. Then, as the eastern sky begins to lighten, anticipation builds like electricity in the air. Suddenly, the first rays of the midsummer sun appear directly over the heelstone, streaming through the great trilithon to illuminate the center of the monument with golden light. This isn't mere coincidence, but the result of careful planning that required sophisticated surveying techniques and precise mathematical calculations. The Sarsen Circle itself functioned as a massive compass, its stones positioned to mark significant points on the horizon where celestial objects would appear at crucial moments throughout the year. The northeastern trilithon frames the midsummer sunrise, while the southwestern trilithon marks the midwinter sunset. But the builders went far beyond these obvious solar alignments to create a monument that could track the far more complex movements of the moon. Understanding lunar astronomy requires appreciating that the moon's behavior is vastly more complicated than the sun's predictable annual cycle. While the sun follows the same path across the sky year after year, the moon traces a complex pattern that takes 18.6 years to complete. During this cycle, the moon rises and sets at different points along the horizon, creating a sophisticated dance that challenges even modern astronomers to predict accurately. The builders of Stonehenge not only understood this complex lunar cycle, but designed their monument to track it with extraordinary precision. The 56 Aubrey holes, arranged in their perfect circle around the monument's perimeter, correspond exactly to important points in the moon's 18.6-year cycle. By moving markers around this circle in specific patterns, prehistoric astronomers could predict when eclipses would occur decades into the future. Recent research using computer modeling has revealed alignments that were previously unknown, including connections to the movements of bright stars and planets. Venus, whose 8-year cycle fascinated ancient astronomers worldwide, has multiple alignments within the Stonehenge complex. The planet's extreme positions coincide with specific sight lines between stones, suggesting that the monument could track planetary movements as well as solar and lunar cycles. The precision of these alignments is extraordinary. The midsummer sunrise alignment is accurate to within 1/3 of a degree, a level of precision that requires sophisticated surveying techniques and careful observation over many years. Achieving such accuracy without metal instruments or optical devices demonstrates observational skills and mathematical knowledge that challenge our assumptions about prehistoric capabilities. Archaeological investigations have revealed evidence of the tools and techniques used for these astronomical observations. Antler picks with carved notches may have served as primitive protractors for measuring angles. Wooden stakes driven into carefully positioned holes could create sight lines for tracking celestial objects across seasons and years. The monument itself was designed as a vast, three-dimensional instrument for measuring time and space. But the astronomical alignments weren't just about practical prediction. They revealed deep spiritual truths about humanity's place in the cosmic order. By demonstrating the mathematical relationships between earthly cycles and celestial movements, Stonehenge showed that the same divine principles governed both human communities and the movements of sun, moon, and stars. The monument's design suggests that its builders understood mathematical concepts that wouldn't be formally developed in European mathematics for thousands of years. The geometric relationships between different stone settings reflect knowledge of principles, including complex ratios and trigonometric functions. These weren't abstract mathematical concepts, but practical tools for understanding divine order. The bluestone arrangements within the Sarsen circle add additional astronomical sophistication. These smaller stones are positioned to create secondary alignments that track more subtle celestial phenomena, including the movements of specific stars and the complex relationship between solar and lunar cycles. The combination of sarsen and bluestone alignments creates an astronomical instrument of unprecedented complexity. Archaeological evidence shows that the monument's astronomical functions evolved over centuries as builders refined their understanding of celestial mechanics. New stones were added, existing alignments were modified, and additional sightlines were created as knowledge accumulated across generations. Stonehenge represents not a single moment of astronomical insight, but centuries of accumulated observation and mathematical refinement. Picture the ancient astronomers who used this stone calculator, standing within the circle on clear nights, their eyes trained on specific points along the horizon where they knew important celestial events would occur. They would have maintained careful records, perhaps using notched sticks or knotted cords to track the complex cycles they observed. Their observations would have been passed down through generations of apprentices, creating an unbroken chain of astronomical knowledge. The social implications of these astronomical capabilities are profound. Accurate prediction of eclipses, seasonal changes, and lunar cycles would have given Stonehenge's priests enormous power and prestige. Communities across prehistoric Britain would have depended on astronomical predictions for agricultural planning, while the ability to foretell eclipses would have seemed like communication with the gods themselves. Recent analysis has revealed that the acoustic properties of the monument were also connected to its astronomical functions. The stone configurations that create the most dramatic sound effects correspond to astronomically significant alignments, suggesting that ceremonies timed to celestial events would have been enhanced by the monument's acoustic design. Sound and sight combined to create multi-sensory experiences of cosmic harmony. Modern astronomical calculations confirm that the monument's builders achieved something extraordinary. They created an instrument that could accurately predict celestial events centuries into the future, using nothing but careful observation, mathematical insight, and supreme confidence in their ability to understand the mind of the cosmos itself. The stones still mark these ancient rhythms, patient guardians of wisdom that connects us across 5 millennia to our ancestors, who first learned to read the language written in light across the darkness of night. As the Great Stone Circle reached completion around 2300 BCE, Stonehenge transformed from construction site to sacred theatre, becoming the stage for ceremonies and rituals that drew people from across prehistoric Britain. The monument pulsed with human activity throughout the year, its astronomical alignments timing gatherings that connected communities to the rhythms of earth and sky in ways that shaped Bronze Age society across the British Isles. Picture the most dramatic ceremonies that took place during the solstices, when the monument's primary astronomical alignments created spectacular theatrical effects. On midsummer morning, hundreds of pilgrims would gather in the pre-dawn darkness, their fires creating islands of light across the Salisbury Plain. As the sun crested the horizon, its first rays would stream directly through the great trilithon, illuminating the center of the monument with golden light that seemed to flow from the stones themselves. Recent archaeological discoveries at nearby Durrington walls have revolutionized our understanding of these ceremonial gatherings. Just 2 miles from Stonehenge lies the largest henge monument in Britain, excavations revealing a vast settlement that housed thousands of people during seasonal festivals. Here we find evidence of hundreds of timber houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and remains of feasting on an unprecedented scale. The archaeological evidence tells extraordinary stories about Bronze Age hospitality and religious celebration. Analysis of animal bones shows that people brought cattle and pigs from hundreds of miles away to contribute to communal feasts. Some cattle were driven from as far as Scotland, their distinctive isotopic signatures revealing journeys that would have taken weeks through prehistoric Britain's challenging terrain. But these weren't simply large meals. They were sacred communions that transformed food into spiritual experience. The cattle bones show evidence of careful butchering techniques that maximized the number of people who could share in each animal, suggesting rituals that emphasized community unity over individual consumption. Pottery analysis reveals vessels designed specifically for communal drinking, including enormous cups that would have required multiple people to lift and share. The midwinter solstice brought different but equally powerful ceremonies focused on themes of death, renewal, and the eternal cycle of seasons. As the shortest day approached, communities would have gathered to witness the sun's lowest point in its annual journey, when it seemed that darkness might triumph permanently over light. The monument's alignment with the midwinter sunset created dramatic effects as the dying light streamed between the Sarsen trilithons. Archaeological evidence suggests that cremation ceremonies were central to Stonehenge rituals throughout its active period. Over 150 cremated individuals have been discovered within the monument, their remains carefully placed in significant locations that suggest elaborate funeral rites. These weren't random burials, but planned interments that connected the dead with the monument's astronomical alignments. Recent analysis of these cremated remains has revealed fascinating details about the people honored with burial at Stonehenge. Many show evidence of having traveled great distances, with some individuals originating from Wales and Western Scotland. This suggests that Stonehenge served as a pilgrimage destination that drew people from across Britain, uniting diverse communities in shared religious experience. The acoustic properties of the monument played crucial roles in ceremonial activities. Recent research has demonstrated that the stone circle creates remarkable sound effects, amplifying human voices while filtering out background noise. Drums beaten within the circle would have resonated between the massive stones, creating rhythmic pulses that could be felt as well as heard. The positioning of the trilithons creates acoustic focal points where speakers could address large gatherings with unprecedented clarity. Experimental archaeology has revealed that certain arrangements of the bluestones produce musical tones when struck, suggesting that the monument may have functioned as a massive stone orchestra during ceremonies. Different stones produce different notes, and recent analysis suggests the acoustic properties were carefully considered when positioning each stone. The combination of human voices, percussion instruments, and the musical stones themselves would have created soundscapes unlike anything experienced in the modern world. Archaeological evidence reveals that ceremonies at Stonehenge weren't limited to the major festivals, but occurred throughout the year as communities marked different phases of agricultural and astronomical cycles. The monument's multiple alignments allowed for a complex ceremonial calendar that connected human activities with celestial events on monthly, seasonal, and annual rhythms. The Avenue, a prehistoric roadway that connects Stonehenge to the River Avon nearly 2 miles away, provides evidence for elaborate processional ceremonies. This earthwork, consisting of parallel banks and ditches, would have channeled ceremonial processions along a route that follows the alignment of the midsummer sunrise. Walking this sacred path would have been a pilgrimage in itself, preparing participants spiritually for their arrival at the stone circle. Recent discoveries along the avenue have revealed evidence of temporary structures that may have sheltered pilgrims during their approach to Stonehenge. Post holes and hearth sites suggest way stations where travelers could rest and prepare for the ceremonies ahead. These discoveries paint a picture of religious tourism that brought people from across Britain to participate in Stonehenge's sacred calendar. The river connection was particularly important for communities arriving by water transport. The Avon provided a highway that connected Stonehenge to distant regions, allowing people to travel by boat before making the final overland journey to the monument. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of the most prestigious grave goods found near Stonehenge arrived via these water routes, including gold ornaments and amber beads from continental Europe. Seasonal ceremonies would have varied dramatically in character and participation. Summer gatherings might have drawn thousands of people, celebrating agricultural abundance and community prosperity. Winter ceremonies could have been more intimate affairs focused on reflection, remembrance of the dead, and preparation for the challenging months ahead. The monument's design accommodated both massive public gatherings and smaller, more exclusive rituals. The integration of astronomical observation with religious ceremony created powerful educational experiences that transmitted knowledge across generations. Children attending these gatherings would have learned to read the sky, understand seasonal patterns, and appreciate their place within cosmic cycles. The monument served as both temple and school, where practical knowledge and spiritual wisdom were inseparably intertwined. Archaeological analysis of offerings placed within the monument reveals the geographic scope of Stonehenge's influence. Artifacts made from materials found hundreds of miles away suggest exchange networks that connected communities across Britain and beyond. These weren't merely trade relationships, but spiritual connections that bound distant peoples into shared religious traditions centered on Stonehenge. The evidence suggests that ceremonies at Stonehenge weren't static traditions repeated unchanged for centuries. Instead, they evolved continuously as communities adapted their practices to changing circumstances while maintaining core spiritual principles. New alignments were added as astronomical knowledge expanded. Additional stones were positioned to accommodate growing numbers of participants, and ritual practices were refined to enhance their spiritual effectiveness. By the height of its ceremonial importance around 2000 BCE, Stonehenge had become the religious heart of prehistoric Britain, a sacred landscape that drew pilgrims from across the British Isles and beyond. The monument's combination of architectural grandeur, astronomical precision, and acoustic sophistication created ceremonial experiences that satisfied both intellectual curiosity and spiritual longing, establishing traditions that would influence British religious life for centuries to come. Around 2000 BCE, as bronze working technology spread across Britain, Stonehenge entered a new phase of its long evolution. The people who gathered at the ancient monument were no longer the Neolithic farmers who had first raised the Sarsen Trellithons. These were Bronze Age communities who had mastered metallurgy, developed complex trade networks, and accumulated wealth that would have been unimaginable to earlier generations. Yet their reverence for the ancient stone circle remained undiminished, leading to modifications and additions that reflected both continuity and change. The most significant Bronze Age addition was the rearrangement of the bluestones into the configuration we see today. Archaeological evidence shows that around 1600 BCE, these precious stones from Wales were carefully repositioned within the Sarsen circle, creating the horseshoe arrangement that frames the monument's central axis. This wasn't random reorganization, but deliberate redesign that enhanced the monument's astronomical alignments while creating new visual and ceremonial effects. Picture the enormous effort required for this rearrangement. Even though these stones were smaller than the massive Sarsens, moving and repositioning them required sophisticated engineering and hundreds of workers. Bronze tools allowed for more accurate stone shaping, while improved understanding of leverage and mechanics made the work more manageable. Yet the scale remained enormous, requiring community cooperation that suggests Stonehenge retained its central importance in Bronze Age religious life. The most remarkable Bronze Age addition was the carving of bronze axes and daggers into several of the Sarsen stones. These carvings, nearly invisible today but clearly documented by archaeological photography, weren't casual graffiti, but carefully planned additions that held deep symbolic meaning. The weapons were positioned to catch and reflect light at specific moments during astronomical events, creating brief but dramatic visual effects during ceremonies. Recent analysis using advanced imaging techniques has revealed that these weapon carvings were far more numerous and sophisticated than previously realized. Over 30 axe carvings and several dagger images have been identified, positioned with careful attention to the monument's sight lines and astronomical alignments. The largest dagger carving appears exactly where the midsummer sunrise illuminates the central trilithon, suggesting that the weapon symbols were intended to capture and concentrate celestial power. Bronze axes and daggers were symbols of power and prestige in Bronze Age society, often buried with elite individuals as marks of their social status. By carving these symbols into the sacred stones of Stonehenge, Bronze Age communities were claiming continuity with the monument's prehistoric builders while asserting their own spiritual authority. The weapons connected earthly power with celestial forces, creating a visual language that spoke to both gods and humans. Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of significant Bronze Age activity around Stonehenge that suggests the monument's ceremonial importance actually increased during this period. New burial mounds appeared across the surrounding landscape, many containing rich grave goods that demonstrate the wealth and far-reaching connections of the people who continued to gather at the ancient stone circle. The most spectacular Bronze Age burial discovery near Stonehenge was the Amesbury archer, found just 3 miles from the monument in 2002. This individual, who died around 2300 BCE, was buried with over 100 artifacts, including copper knives, gold ornaments, stone arrowheads, and pottery vessels. Isotopic analysis of his teeth revealed that he had grown up in the Alps, possibly in Switzerland or Austria, yet chose to be buried within sight of Stonehenge. This remarkable burial illustrates the international significance that Stonehenge had achieved by the Bronze Age. The archer's grave goods included some of the earliest metalwork found in Britain, suggesting he may have been among the people who introduced bronze working technology to the British Isles. His decision to spend his final years near Stonehenge demonstrates that the monument drew not just local pilgrims, but international travelers who recognized its spiritual importance. The period between 2000 and 1500 BCE saw the construction of hundreds of burial mounds around Stonehenge, creating a sacred landscape that extended far beyond the stone circle itself. These barrows weren't randomly positioned, but carefully placed to maintain visual connections with the monument while respecting ancient territorial boundaries. The cumulative effect was to transform the entire Salisbury Plain into a vast cemetery where the dead could rest in eternal proximity to the sacred stones. Analysis of Bronze Age burials reveals changing attitudes toward death and ancestry that influenced how Stonehenge was used and understood. Earlier Neolithic practices had emphasized cremation and communal burial, reflecting egalitarian societies where individual identity was subsumed within group membership. Bronze Age burials, by contrast, celebrated individual achievement and personal wealth, suggesting societies where skilled craftsmen and successful traders could accumulate prestige and power. Yet despite these social changes, Stonehenge continued to serve as a unifying force that brought diverse communities together for shared ceremonies. Archaeological evidence shows that Bronze Age modifications to the monument enhanced its capacity to accommodate large gatherings, with new arrangements that improved sight lines and acoustic effects for increasingly sophisticated religious performances. The avenue was extended and modified during the Bronze Age, creating a more elaborate processional route that enhanced the ceremonial approach to Stonehenge. Archaeological investigation has revealed evidence of temporary structures along the avenue that may have provided rest stops for pilgrims, while new alignments were added that connected the monument to astronomical events that had gained importance in Bronze Age religious practice. Recent research has revealed that Bronze Age communities maintained detailed knowledge of the monument's Neolithic origins while adding their own interpretations to its meaning and function. They understood that the massive Sarsen trilithons had been erected by earlier generations, but they saw themselves as legitimate inheritors of this sacred tradition, authorized to modify and enhance the monument according to their own spiritual insights. The astronomical knowledge preserved at Stonehenge was particularly valued by Bronze Age communities who depended on accurate calendar systems for agricultural planning and long-distance trade. The monument's ability to predict eclipses and track complex celestial cycles made it an invaluable resource for communities whose prosperity depended on coordination across vast networks of exchange and cooperation. By 1500 BCE, Stonehenge had evolved into a monument that seamlessly blended prehistoric architecture with Bronze Age additions, creating a structure that was simultaneously ancient and contemporary. The vision that had inspired its Neolithic builders remained alive and vital, yet expressed through new technologies and social arrangements that reflected the changing world of Bronze Age Britain. The monument stood as testimony to human continuity across millennia, each generation adding their own understanding while preserving the sacred vision of their ancestors. As the Bronze Age gave way to the Iron Age around 800 BCE, Stonehenge began its long transformation from active ceremonial center to mysterious ruin. The communities that had maintained the monument for over 2 millennia gradually shifted their religious focus to new sites and practices. Yet the Great Stone Circle continued to capture human imagination in ways that would echo through centuries of changing civilizations and beliefs. When Roman legions first marched across Salisbury Plain in 43 CE, they encountered a monument already ancient beyond their comprehension. To Roman eyes, accustomed to architectural precision and engineering excellence, Stonehenge must have seemed both impressive and utterly alien. The massive trilithons, weathered by over 2,000 years of British weather, stood like giants from a forgotten age, their builders' names and purposes lost to time. Roman writers struggled to understand what they were seeing. The historian Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BCE, described a circular temple in Britain where Apollo danced and played music. While his account mixed Greek mythology with garbled reports from distant Britain, It captures the awe that Stonehenge inspired even among sophisticated Mediterranean observers who had seen the architectural marvels of Rome and Athens. Archaeological evidence shows that Romans occasionally visited Stonehenge, leaving behind coins and pottery that suggest the monument retained some significance during the imperial period. But Roman religious practices were fundamentally different from the astronomical ceremonies that had once filled the stone circle with sacred purpose. The Romans worshipped in rectangular temples with roofs and walls, following rituals that emphasized human control over divine forces rather than harmony with celestial cycles. The decline wasn't sudden, but gradual, spanning centuries as Iron Age and Romano-British communities developed new spiritual traditions. The monument's astronomical alignments remained accurate, the acoustic properties unchanged, yet the knowledge needed to use these features effectively was slowly being forgotten. Without active maintenance, some of the smaller stones began to shift or fall, though the massive sarsen trilithons remained essentially unchanged. During the Romano-British period, local communities developed folk traditions that attempted to explain the mysterious stone circle. Stories emerged of giants who had built the monument in a single night, of magic stones that could heal diseases, of ancient kings buried beneath the massive sarsens. These tales, passed down through oral tradition, preserved memory of Stonehenge's importance while transforming its prehistoric builders into legendary figures. The end of Roman rule in 410 CE brought new peoples to Britain, including Anglo-Saxon settlers who encountered Stonehenge with fresh eyes unclouded by classical assumptions about proper architecture. To these Germanic migrants, the stone circle may have seemed more familiar than it had to Romans. Their own traditions included sacred groves and stone monuments, though nothing approaching Stonehenge's scale and sophistication. Anglo-Saxon place names provide clues about how early medieval communities understood the monument. Stonehenge itself derives from the Old English Stanhengen, meaning hanging stones, a description that focused on the remarkable trilithon lintels suspended impossibly in mid-air. This practical, descriptive name suggests that Anglo-Saxon visitors were more impressed by the monument's engineering than by any lingering sense of its sacred purpose. Medieval chronicles began to weave Stonehenge into the emerging Arthurian legends that were reshaping British historical memory. Geoffrey of Monmouth, writing in the 12th century, claimed that the wizard Merlin had transported the stones from Ireland using magic, creating a memorial for British nobles killed by Saxon treachery. This story, while historically inaccurate, preserved important truths about the monument's great antiquity and the extraordinary effort required for its construction. The association with Merlin and Arthur gave Stonehenge new significance for medieval communities who saw themselves as heirs to ancient British traditions. Pilgrims began visiting the monument not for astronomical ceremonies, but to connect with legendary figures who represented resistance to foreign invasion. The stones became symbols of British identity and cultural continuity that transcended religious and political changes. Archaeological evidence from the medieval period shows continued interest in Stonehenge despite the lack of active religious use. Medieval visitors left behind personal items, including brooches, buckles, and coins that suggest people came to the monument seeking good fortune or spiritual blessing. Some may have believed that touching the ancient stones could cure diseases or provide protection from evil. The medieval church initially viewed Stonehenge with suspicion, associating pagan monuments with diabolic influences. Some ecclesiastical writers condemned visits to stone circles as remnants of heathen worship that threatened Christian souls. Yet this opposition may have enhanced rather than diminished popular interest in the monument, transforming visits to Stonehenge into acts of cultural defiance against religious authority. By the high medieval period, Stonehenge had acquired a reputation throughout Europe as one of the wonders of the world. Travelers from distant lands came to see the mysterious stone circle, adding their own interpretations to the growing collection of legends surrounding the monument. Each visitor carried away stories that spread Stonehenge's fame across the medieval world, ensuring that its reputation would survive even as its original purpose was forgotten. The Renaissance brought new approaches to understanding Stonehenge, as scholars began to apply systematic observation and measurement to the ancient monument. Yet even as they recorded precise dimensions and documented structural details, the essential mystery remained. Who had built this extraordinary place, and why had they undertaken such an enormous project with nothing but stone tools and human muscle? The 17th century marked the beginning of serious archaeological investigation at Stonehenge, when antiquarian John Aubrey first mapped the monument and discovered the ring of holes that now bear his name. His careful observations laid the foundation for scientific study, yet his conclusions were shaped by the limited knowledge of his time. Aubrey believed the monument was built by ancient Druids, an attribution that would persist for centuries despite lack of supporting evidence. The 18th century brought more systematic investigation, as architects and engineers began to document Stonehenge with unprecedented precision. William Stukely conducted extensive surveys and excavations, creating detailed drawings that remain valuable today. Yet Stukely too was captivated by Druid theories, weaving romantic fantasies around the stone circle that said more about Georgian England's fascination with the Celtic past than about prehistoric reality. The 19th century witnessed growing scientific rigor in Stonehenge studies, as archaeologists began to apply stratigraphic excavation techniques and careful artifact analysis. The discovery of Bronze Age burial goods around the monument provided the first reliable dating evidence, pushing the construction back far earlier than anyone had imagined. Yet the fundamental questions remained unanswered. How had prehistoric people managed to transport and erect such massive stones? The 20th century brought revolutionary changes in our understanding of Stonehenge. Radiocarbon dating provided precise chronologies that revealed the monument's construction spanning over 1,500 years. Aerial photography revealed the full extent of the archaeological landscape surrounding the stone circle. Most dramatically, the discovery of the Durrington Walls settlement showed that Stonehenge was part of a much larger sacred complex. Recent decades have seen extraordinary advances in Stonehenge archaeology, driven by new technologies that can reveal secrets hidden for millennia. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped buried features without disturbing the soil. Isotopic analysis of cremated remains has traced the origins of people buried at the monument. Advanced acoustic modeling has revealed the sophisticated sound effects created by the stone arrangements. The discovery of the actual blue stone quarries in Wales, announced in 2015, represents one of the most significant archaeological breakthroughs in recent memory. For the first time, researchers could trace the complete journey of the bluestones from their Welsh origins to their final positions at Stonehenge. The evidence revealed transportation methods and organizational capabilities that far exceeded previous estimates of Neolithic capabilities. Modern astronomical analysis has confirmed and expanded upon the monument's celestial alignments, revealing a sophisticated understanding of lunar cycles that rivals modern observations. Computer modeling has identified previously unknown alignments with stars and planets, suggesting that Stonehenge functioned as an even more complex astronomical instrument than earlier researchers had imagined. Yet for all our scientific advances, Stonehenge continues to guard its deepest secrets. We can document what happened and when, but the why remains elusive. What drove communities to invest such enormous effort in creating this monument? What spiritual insights or religious visions justified the transportation of massive stones across hundreds of miles of challenging terrain? Perhaps the mystery is part of Stonehenge's enduring power. In our age of instant communication and constant connectivity, the monument stands as a reminder of deeper rhythms and more permanent truths. The stones have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the coming and going of civilizations, yet they remain unchanged, patient guardians of wisdom we're still learning to understand. Today, Stonehenge draws over 1 million visitors annually, people from every corner of the globe who come to experience something that transcends ordinary understanding. They stand where our ancestors stood 5,000 years ago, watching the same sun rise over the same stones, feeling the same sense of wonder and connection that has drawn humans to this sacred place across all the centuries since its creation. Modern pagans gather at the solstices, recreating ceremonies that honor the monument's original purpose while adding their own contemporary spiritual insights. Archaeologists continue to make new discoveries that refine our understanding of prehistoric Britain. Astronomers find new alignments that reveal additional layers of ancient knowledge. Each generation adds its own interpretations while preserving the essential mystery that makes Stonehenge eternally compelling. The monument speaks to something fundamental in human nature, our need to create lasting meaning in the face of mortality and change. Our Neolithic ancestors understood that individual lives are brief, but communities and traditions can endure across millennia if they're built on foundations strong enough to withstand the tests of time. Stonehenge is their gift to us, a message carved in stone that still resonates across 5,000 years of human experience. As our journey through time draws to a peaceful close, let's return together to the present moment, to the gentle quiet of this evening, carrying with us the profound peace that comes from touching something truly eternal. We've walked with our ancestors across 5 millennia, shared their visions, and witnessed their extraordinary achievements, and now we can rest in the knowledge that we too are part of this endless human story. Picture yourself one more time standing within the ancient stone circle, but now in the soft light of today's sunset. The massive trilithons rise around you like gentle giants, their weathered surfaces holding the memories of countless generations who have stood in this sacred space. Feel the soft grass beneath your feet, the same earth that supported the first builders as they dug their gleaming white circle into the chalk downs so long ago. The stones haven't changed, not really. Time has softened their edges and mellowed their colors, but they stand as firmly today as they did when the last Bronze Age craftsman stepped back to admire his completed work. They've watched empires rise and fall, seen ice ages come and go, witnessed the slow dance of continents shifting across the face of the earth. Yet, through it all, they've remained constant, patient, eternal. What wisdom do they offer us in our hurried modern world? Perhaps it's simply this, that some things transcend the frantic pace of daily life, that there are rhythms deeper and more meaningful than the artificial urgencies that fill our days. The sun still rises in the same place it did 5,000 years ago. The moon still follows her ancient path across the star-scattered sky. The seasons still turn in their eternal wheel, indifferent to human ambition and anxiety. Our ancestors understood this deeper rhythm, built their lives around it, created monuments that honored it. They knew something we sometimes forget, that we are not separate from nature, but part of it, not masters of time, but participants in its endless flow. The stones of Stonehenge remind us that the most important human achievements are those that align themselves with forces greater than individual will or temporary desire. Think of the countless people who have found peace within this ancient circle. Neolithic farmers celebrating successful harvests under stars brighter than any we can see today. Bronze Age craftsmen laying down their tools at the end of long days spent shaping sacred stones. Medieval pilgrims seeking connection with legendary heroes and ancient wisdom. Modern visitors from every corner of our interconnected world, all drawn by the same inexplicable pull toward something that transcends ordinary understanding. You are part of this long procession of seekers, this endless human quest for meaning and connection that stretches back to the very beginnings of consciousness itself. The questions that brought you here tonight are the same questions that drove our ancestors to create Stonehenge in the first place. Who are we? Why are we here? How do we fit into the vast mystery of existence? The stones don't provide easy answers, but they offer something perhaps more valuable. The assurance that these questions matter, that the search itself is sacred, that wonder and reverence are among humanity's most precious gifts. In our age of rapid change and constant noise, Stonehenge stands as an invitation to stillness, to contemplation, to the deep peace that comes from recognizing our place in something infinitely larger than ourselves. As you prepare for sleep tonight, carry with you the profound tranquility of this ancient place. Let the massive stones become guardians of your rest, their patient presence, a reminder that morning will come, that the sun will rise as it always has, that you are held in the same cosmic embrace that has sustained human communities across all the centuries since Stonehenge first rose from the Salisbury Plain. Feel yourself connected to that long chain of human experience, part of a story that began in the mists of prehistory and continues through you into an unknown but hopeful future. The builders of Stonehenge created something that would outlast their own brief lives, a gift to generations they would never see. Tonight, their gift comes to you across 5,000 years, carrying with it the peace that comes from touching eternity. Sleep well, knowing that you too are part of this eternal circle, this endless human dance with mystery and meaning that connects past and future in the sacred present moment. The stones stand their patient vigil through the night, as they have for 50 centuries, as they will for 50 centuries more. In their silence, find your peace. In their endurance, discover your rest. In their eternal presence, know that you are home. The stone circle holds you gently as consciousness fades into dreams, where ancient ceremonies continue in landscapes lit by stars that shone over the first builders of Stonehenge. Sleep deeply, peacefully, eternally, in the embrace of something greater than time itself. The stones will keep their vigil until morning comes again, as morning always comes, bringing new light to chase away the darkness and begin the endless cycle once more. Good night.